my computer. All right, so welcome again, and thank you to McGraw-Hill for sponsoring our webinar series. So today's webinar, we're building accessible math materials. To start with, let's just talk about why we're all here, why this was so popular. The DOJ update requires that all web content be accessible by April 24th. So we have 11 days until this deadline. All web content means anything that we provide digitally. And for those of us, we got used to it during COVID, right? Providing everything online. So we have a lot of materials probably online, PDFs, videos, links, anything we want students to use that we put inside of our LMS. They qualify as web materials and need to be at a WCAG 2.1 AA standard. So we're going to talk about PDFs eventually. I want to give us a little bit of a roadmap. We only have an hour together, and I can't assume everyone's at the same place. So I am going to start with Accessibility 101, chatting about headings, alt text. I know for some of you that's going to be review you already know. So hopefully you'll be chiming in with the chat with some of your best practices and ideas that you have for those pieces. Then we're going to get into, I think, what matters most to us as math faculty. How do we make our PDFs, our documents, those pages in our LMS accessible? For most of us, it's a remediation. We already created all these beautiful materials. Like, how do I make them accessible so I can continue using them? And then we'll talk very briefly about video remediation and things that I'm doing in that space to help make sure that everything I'm providing to my students is accessible for them. Okay. So to start with, though, I do want to give us a shared space to work with. Let me get this link for the chat really quick. Oh, she didn't want to actually link. That's annoying. But you could also, I personally never click on a QR code in a thing. I don't know this. There we go. So now it's clickable. So you should have that link. What that link takes you to is a set of shared notes. These actually started as shared notes from a webinar I did for @ONE, which is a California-wide network of online educators. So there's already some questions and examples and things in there. But this is a space where, because I know I have experts in the room, you can provide some of your input. I find the chat when I'm in a webinar, it's really hard to keep track of all the chat things. And whenever I want to save something, it's really hard to do. So this gives us all now something that's always going to be in your shared drive in Google that you can go back to and you can reference. This is sort of my UDL side of things where I feel like I want folks to have other ways to interact with material as opposed to just my slides, just this recording. So here you have a space. If you have a question that you have, you can go ahead and answer it, or a general topic like, I want to remediate my PDFs. Put it in here, and then you can get feedback from other folks working. And then after this webinar, I will also go in, and if there was anything shared in the chat, I'll edit this to include that information so that we have everything that was shared in one place. Another piece that's in here, I've got the link to my slides, a link to a workbook, a Canvas resource site. I'm going to show you all of those things as we go. Some general resources, and then resources specific to actual things you might be using. So Paul Seeberger, who's in the room, provided a bunch of great documentation for working with Overleaf to create accessible PDFs, as well as some guided notes and templates, which were amazing. Jessica Bernards, who gave our talk in our webinar last month on AI integration, provided some additional resources. So I put these all there. So hopefully you have a lot of resources, even if you can't stay the whole time, or you're just looking for the answer to a certain question. Hopefully it's in here, or you can get it in this space. So that being said, let's jump into sort of our Accessibility 101. But a little note before we get started. That note is don't panic. First, only digital materials are within the scope. So one of the biggest pieces of feedback I have for faculty looking to work in this on making their stuff accessible is like, go through and really have an editing eye with what you're providing to students. This also is beneficial for students because a lot of the time what we're providing for them is almost overwhelming, right? If we could take away that cognitive load by giving them just a couple of things to work with, they'd actually be better off. So that's sort of the first thing to have. Glad someone got my reference. One of the first things to have is just go through and be like, do I really need this document? Is it worthwhile for me to spend the time on it? Or could I possibly remove it from my LMS or whatever my students are working through? Another one is this landscape is ever evolving. The heart of these slides started with a presentation I did back in January, and I had to make significant edits because new technology and new tools were available now. So even if you get on top of it right now, it's going to be different in 2 months. So just sort of know that maybe there's something you can't do at this moment, but maybe in a couple of months, someone is going to have come up with a solution to that. So just kind of don't panic, it's coming. And then do consider, like I said, when I do a webinar, I want folks to have multiple ways to interact with the material. And so having those shared notes allows me to provide a lot of the same resources and content in a different format that might work better for other people. So consider having different formats as well as making sure each of those formats are accessible. But let's get into Accessibility 101. So I think the difference working with math faculty, the most common thing I've heard doing a number of accessibility talks is how do I make alt text for graphs, especially if I'm doing them for assessments. How am I going to write alt text that doesn't give away the answer, but still provides information for the student? So first and foremost, why do we need alt text? So I'm going to throw this out to the chat. Anybody want to type in? Take some space and make this as interactive as we can in the dang webinar format because I love an active classroom. Yes, Elizabeth shows that for screen readers, 100%. Any other? Oh, not everyone can see or understand the picture. For anyone who can't see the material. Yeah, so we have alt text. Mostly the accessibility side of this is for people using screen readers. Any student using a screen reader needs to have the same access to our text and our information as any sighted student or a student who's not using a screen reader. Additionally, much like every other accessibility consideration, there are benefits to other groups. So for me, this was really useful. I'm really bad at copying and pasting from one course to another inside of my LMS. So I'll like take an announcement that had an image and I'll post it into a different class as just a copy paste. And the image lives in my other course. And so students can't see it and they don't even know what I was trying to do with that. So it's actually useful for those of you who make a mistake every once in a while, like I have. So if the image doesn't load, whether or not it's on you, the student will know that there was an image there and get some idea of what the image was about. So I used to use this in my online classes when I had exams in my online classes as like the very first thing. I was like, here's an image. If this doesn't load, you need to tell me because there are images throughout the actual test and I need to know that you can see them. So my alt text was like, if you don't see an image here, contact me ASAP because something is wrong with your browser. We need to clear your cookies or cache. We need to figure this out before you take the test. So again, 101, if we're new to alt text, the real thing is to convey the purpose. Why is that image there? You don't want to duplicate anything that's on the screen. So if you're going to go ahead and describe it inside of the actual text, you can don't need to rewrite that inside of the alt text. That is going to be read twice by a screen reader. You don't want to include image of because that's what the screen reader is going to read. So you don't need to include that. Don't include file extensions. You want to be descriptive, but as short as possible. You'll note a lot of accessibility checkers, at least the built-in ones that I have in my LMS. We use Canvas. They really limit you. I think we have 140 characters in Canvas before Canvas starts like yelling at you for not being accessible. And in those cases, you can make a decision on your own, or you can move that description into the text itself. But yeah, it's like writing a tweet. Another great strategy here is if you are being a little too verbose, AI is pretty good at trimming those within the character limits that are not going to make your accessibility checker angry. So if we need it. In Canvas, again, these slides were for a campus that used Canvas, but in nearly every platform that you're going to be working with images, with the exception of Overleaf for my text fans, you are just going to right click on the image and it will pop up the ability to add alt text. So if I'm in a thing, I can edit alt text. So this is just a Word doc where I can go ahead and add my alt text for what it is I'm trying to do. Now, the math side. Um, I would probably, if I had more time, have you actually write alt text for this lovely display. But again, your purpose of the alt text and the purpose of your use of this within a course really drives the conversation, right? Is the goal here to show the differences in center and variability between the different positions? In which case, you probably want to maybe even provide some information about the median and range or IQR for each of these distributions. But again, that's going to be really long. That's going to get us over that 120 or 140 characters. So that's one of those things where maybe I should also be providing that information in a table or some other format in the text to go next to this visualization so that I don't have to describe each of those characteristics of the graph in my actual alt text. I think we've used for this one a standard formula, which is from writing alt text for data viz. That's a box plot for heights of soccer players, where here's my reason for including it, to show goalkeepers are generally taller than other positions and have less variability in their heights. And I should have probably also said by position on the soccer field. And then if you can, provide a link to the data source so that folks could use that in whatever sense they wanted to really get a sense of the data. So that's alt text. That's obviously more on the stat side of things. For pure math, I find the best option here is just to provide a link out to Desmos, to CalcPlot3D of the graph that you wanted to include. Both CalcPlot3D and Desmos are compliant. They work with keyboard shortcuts. Desmos even has the ability for students to listen to graphs. I'm sure Paul can put in the chat whether or not there's a similar situation for students using screen readers in CalcPlot3D. But we have really, really good tools within the math space to provide graphs that are completely accessible. All right. Not yet. I mean, I can't imagine how you do it in 3D, Paul. But it does seem good. Yes, and Gonzalo asked a question in the chat. 120 character limit is aggressive, and that's only in certain LMSs, right, that have that requirement. I don't tend to that, right? Like reading a math graph, there's a lot of detail going on. There's a lot to unpack in that space, in that one image. So even when my LMS yells at me for being over 120, often I just tell it to be quiet, because I'm like, I can't cut any of this without losing information that is part of the purpose of the graph or the infographic or whatever it might be being in my course. So don't feel like you're tied to that, but the goal is to be as succinct as possible. And if you're finding yourself well over 120, yes, it's hard. It's really hard to be succinct. But if it is over that, maybe consider if some of that description couldn't go into the text surrounding it as a way to sort of make sure that others, even the sighted students, right? You want to make sure that they're getting the same thing out of that graph. And while I see all these beautiful things when I look at a graph, we don't know that the students are making all of those same conclusions and making those same seeing those same things. So maybe it's worth moving some of it into the text if you're getting too long. But I'm much on the side of Paul. I probably give too much information and find it really hard to stay in that 120 character limit. I feel like that's meant for not mathematical images. While I'm here, worth mentioning, colors are a really big thing. Make sure that there's high contrast. Again, a lot of the accessibility checkers will tell you when your contrast levels are not working, not within, like, are too close to each other. But it's just an important idea. I know that there are schools of thought, the pretext folks don't like using color at all in their math. I do when I write my lecture notes, when I work within Canvas's like math editor, but don't use them only to convey meaning. So try to make sure that you're also like in text telling what you're doing. But if you want resources, I'll make sure that these are in that resource document. There are a lot of things that you can throw your images, your data viz into to see what they look like with different types of maybe color blindness to make sure that you don't get in any trouble. And yeah, I'm sure, Wendy, that there are some accessible color palettes that you could be using. Yes. But yeah, as long as you like, we have this, Louise said in the chat, like I use color as my answer key, but I also say answer. So like something like that means that you're not using color only to convey meaning. So you're perfectly fine to use color in those situations. And then we have another question in the chat I need to mention really quick. If I link to Desmos in the surrounding text and not the alt text, should the alt text reference the surrounding text? It doesn't need to, right? When this is being read to a student who's using a screen reader, it's going to read through the whole text. Wherever that image is going to say and describe the image. So you should reference the image in the text, but I wouldn't go back and reference the link or anything else in your alt text, because again, it's just going to repeat what they've already read in the text or listened to in the text. All right, so let's move on to content pieces in terms of accessibility. One thing that GeoGebra, to get there, GeoGebra is somewhat accessible. Since people can build their own things in GeoGebra, some of those things could be inaccessible. GeoGebra as a tool is accessible at that standard. Making accessible content. A lot of the accessibility checkers, they don't check for heading structure unless there is a heading structure. And then they're just checking to make sure you haven't skipped a heading. So headings are really important. Students with a screen reader can then navigate quickly to new sections. They don't have to listen to an entire section. If they're already done with their double integrals and they want to move on to double integrals and polar, they can tab to that next section without having to listen through everything. They're also incredibly useful for those of us who are not using a screen reader. In fact, I use these shared notes as an example, right? Having headings allows us to go straight to a section and look at those resources. And even if I didn't have the ability to click on these headings, it still lets me scroll down and figure out what things are really quickly at a glance. So headings are incredibly important, whether or not you are just trying to be accessible, right? We're trying to meet this guideline. So I just said it. Again, screen readers, super important to have headings. It also gives those visual cues for organization. Tips for headings. Always, they have to go in order. You cannot skip. They are not just there for cute looks. I used to think that. I have, come so far in my journey. Anything lower rank is a subsection. So those of us who are text people who've used a lot of overleaf and LaTeX, we're very well. We label things section, subsection, subsection. Same thing in any other document. We should be using the header. And that header is something where we do want to make sure that when we are, hold on, I gotta get you the whole image, that when we're looking at something like this, that we are actually having things mapped as the heading we're talking about. So heading 2, and then moving down. We're going to talk about this document because it's not great. If I had more to say about triple integrals, I would have a heading number 3. So if I was going to do this, and this is all part of a document, so this is a continuation of other lecture notes. That's why heading 1 isn't there. I might put like comparison of integrals across the calculus. And then I would just highlight this, go into my styles, and call this heading 3. So I'm going from 2 to 3. This is another option where, in theory, our AI could help us if you needed some help structuring out your headings before you get started. But I think most of us have some good ideas of what it is our structure is to whatever it is we're providing. But my biggest warning here, You could have no headings and you'll get a pass from an accessibility checker. But anything long, you really need to have headings to help with that navigation for students. All right, so I showed you how to add it in Word, in Canvas, or LMS. It's typically the same thing. You highlight. It's almost always in a little box at the top that lets you choose your heading level. For most LMSs, the page is heading 1. So you don't have to start with heading 1. In fact, you don't have the option because the page name itself is your heading 1. If you're working in Canvas and somebody who uses Brightspace can chime in. For Canvas, we can also just vomit tech anywhere we want. So that can be in a heading, it can be in a comment, and a rubric, as long as we use these particular delimiters, the slash parentheses, we can throw math into a heading if you want. So that's something that not everybody knows, that we can just sort of throw this wherever we want. We don't need to have the editor available to us. And if you're in some other platform, it's worth trying those different delimiters to see if they work. I was just playing with Jupyter Notebooks the other day in a workshop and found out that the $ delimiters managed to have math show up. So just play around to figure out what makes the math show up. It's either going to be this delimiter or $ typically to get your inline math. Cool. Almost done with 101. Lists, make sure you're actually using lists. You're not just writing 1, 2, or using dashes, that you're using the built-in list that exists in whatever you're writing with, whether that is Overleaf, Word, your LMS. Tables, this is another space where this lecture notes that I have up really fail, is that they use a table for organization here. We should never use tables for layout. We should always, because they are a pain in the butt. You can, especially like within our LMS, I can specify how they get read, but it is more work, a lot more work to set the HTML that way up just to have something look okay. And honestly, most of those tables render really poorly in the mobile version of our LMS, so I should probably get rid of them. I might keep the table in this for me to bring to class. A printed copy, bringing to class, I can have a table. In the version for other folks, the biggest issue is that a screen reader might read across the column before it goes to the next section, and that's not going to make any sense logically. You can usually tag whether your headings, like which one is in charge of the table, but it is a lot more work, to the point where if I was going to actually provide this to students, I would just redo that and make this maybe even a heading 4, because that's where I'm at, and then just copy paste the content. If I'm in a digital format, I don't need to be tight and use less space. The reason I am using less space is purely because I'm printing this and I don't want to use so much paper. So if I'm in a digital space, I don't necessarily have that same need. Alternatively, I could use columns, and the column setting will be fine in terms of me getting having it read properly down each column. But I think a lot of us, especially, there was like a period of time when we all got Canvas cute. Maybe it was just me. There was a period of time where everyone got Canvas cute and made like the most adorable home pages with like images you could click on and such. And most of the time, those Canvas pages, or the home pages to those LMSs, used a bunch of tables to organize the cute stuff on that homepage. So just know, get rid of those tables. I know it's going to be painful, but it will be better for accessibility. The last piece here, descriptive links. This is probably the one I see the most in district-wide things. Do not give a student all of this. This will be read, every character in a row, by the screen reader, and will be an absolute pain. Instead, write a descriptive link in the place of it. If you do Control K, it brings up this link editor. So you just Control K in any platform, brings this up. And so the one thing is, you don't need the click here. You only need the part that says where you're going. So I see a lot of click here's in those like flyers around campus and whatnot, but instead just where are they going? Let them know. You can see that throughout my shared notes. every time I provided a link, I tried to make sure that it was saying where it was headed and not the full HTML, not a click here. All right, and the last piece are those digital materials. This is what the chat has been going off about. Oh, actually, that's interactive tools. Interactive tools, most of the time I would just say right now while we're here, because I probably won't get that far into the slides. Like I said, Desmos is really great. Calcplot 3D is great. GeoGebra is great on the surface, but again, most of the time you can check for the platforms themselves whether or not they meet these guidelines. They provide their accessibility. They should provide their accessibility. They might have a VPAT, they might have something else, but they usually have some page where they say they meet these standards. If it's a platform where folks can create their own materials like MyOpenMath, you have to be cognizant that you need to check the materials that are created, right? Anybody can make in MyOpenMath question, which means they may not have provided alt text if there's an image, or so you just need to be really careful that you are checking within those platforms that have user created content that the content that was created is accessible. And we got some good questions about that because we're going to text. Let's talk text because this is what's happening in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Rob's full name. So we've talked about those accessibility considerations: headings, lists, tables, alt text, math. We're going to keep going. So for most of us, we're starting from different places with those PDFs. Some of us were really good, or we just taught these classes and we still have all of the documents that we were working with, right? I still have every set of lecture notes that I need to remediate in Word for my Calc 3 class because I just prepped that for the first time last semester and I'm making edits now. However, I'm in a much more difficult space for statistics where I made a beautiful set of lecture notes years ago and I have no idea where the original documents are. They are just now PDFs, and I have no idea where my originals are. And of course, we also have this, what we're all doing now, I feel like, we like to write math. It's just so much nicer than typing math, right? It's what we do in class. And so for me, I use OneNote for education, and because we're a Microsoft school, so it's free, and I write in my notes in a shared space where all my students can see them. So if they miss class or in the back of the room, they have my notes right there. But now they're handwritten and definitely not tagged in any sort of useful way. So those are a little bit harder to work with, right? So PDFs are really, really, really challenging. If that's where you're starting with, I mean, I've seen it in the chat. There are a lot of companies and places out there now that'll give you a couple of free tagged PDFs. I think I've linked some of them in the resources page. But often, it doesn't matter if we started with a really good document that had headings, had all the beautiful math and everything. They can be really, really hard to make sure the tags are good. So I have taken things that are in PDF, gone in and used the narration. There's a narrator. If you just type into your like start bar narrator, Microsoft has a built-in screen reader. It's called something else for Apple. Somebody can put that into the resources or into the chat. But you can actually see what it's like to have a screen reader and as you're moving around a document, see what it says. And so I use this example from a colleague because I believe these notes were made the correct way in Word, right? I believe that. I believe these are actually headings of different levels. I believe that this is inline math using the math editor and Microsoft. But when I listen to this, it is terrible. In fact, I actually said, you know what? There's a cool thing in our paid Acrobat that I have that says, go ahead and auto tag it. I was like, great, this is amazing. I just press this button. I'll be able to tell folks in my webinars, in my talks, you just press this button. But it was bad. It was absolutely horrid. You can see this was the auto tagging. It gave an H1 and H2. What is obviously a heading 3 to me, it called H2. And what's worse It tagged this entire sentence as a figure. There's one mathematical equation in the middle of this inline text, right? Like it, so it was really, really bad. So the amount of work it would have taken me to remediate this PDF was insurmountable. It was not worthwhile to me. So what do I need to do instead? Well, we want to provide students a fully accessible version of the material. If we are stuck in PDF only land, one solution is to create a page within your LMS. I know this is Canvas, but within your LMS, because our LMSs are inherently accessible, right? They were chosen for this with the same material. And my suggestions for that is use AI, leverage AI. It can do a good job of reading that document much better than Adobe's auto tagging did. And so what I've done is I've just provided things like that document. In fact, let's go right there. I have this as one of the links. Here are the lecture notes that we had, right? This was the gradient and directional derivative lecture notes that we had. You can see, hopefully, it's even got my writing. All I did was export this from OneNote. This is what I would have provided in the past, right? All I did was use this prompt below. You're helping me create an accessible HTML. In fact, let me make I realize I always have like negative zoom, not being very accessible there. You're helping me create an accessible HTML version with the following document for use in a Canvas page. Because AI, especially I was using this for ChatGPT, because ChatGPT loves to add things, I made some requirements. Do not add, remove, summarize, or reword. I want it to be exactly the same. The goal is to provide an accessible alternative, but make changes for accessibility and structure. So I want HTML for Canvas. I need headings, paragraphs, lists. I need you to make sure that you represent my mathematical, this is all in a link, mathematical content as text-based notation. So it gives me that. In fact, if we go this, I don't think it has my thing. Oh yeah, so this was the exact, I just copy and pasted from ChatGPT into this. So this has some of the garbage still. You can see it still has the beginning of this because my lecture notes I had exported from OneNote, so they still had a little header saying what day I had written them on. And then it has some more things. The image it couldn't bring in, so it gave me the image, but it gave me alt text for the image already. So I still have a little bit of work. I still have to go in and type those, like add these pieces, but it's much better than it would have been for me to have to type in all of this myself or go back to Word and type in my completed lecture notes. And so this is just one of those sorts of examples of like, if you're willing to use AI to shortcut some work, it is really nice to say, I've already done the work. Please just redo it for me in this other format. I did try this with Notebook LM. It did not understand my Canvas formatting. It was really problematic in terms of the text and the HTML. I haven't tried it with Gemini. I will say for handwritten math, when I worked with faculty on this, some faculty had better luck with Gemini recognizing their handwriting than they did with ChatGPT. So this is one of those moments where if you have access to multiple AI things and you're going to try to convert your handwritten work, to just know that they will behave differently for each person depending on their handwriting. So you'll have to deal with that eventually. So like I said, leverage AI if you can. It can definitely create structured HTML really quickly. It can convert math, whether it's handwritten or not, into beautiful text to copy paste into your LMS, into Canvas, into whatever it is you're using. It's really nice. Oh, let me address this one comment in the chat. Canvas's accessibility checker is not great. The built-in one. We have an additional one on top, Poke Tech. There are others that folks will have within their instances. So whatever your LMS has, usually your like instructional designer, your online person at your school has chosen an accessibility checker in addition to the one that's built into Canvas. Just because Canvas gives you a thumbs up, it's not checking everything. Like I said, I can get a thumbs up from Word and have a document that has no headings where all my formatting is in a table. It doesn't check everything. I still need to have some knowledge on my own. And the Canvas Accessibility Checker's main flaw is unlike when I use Pope Tech, it flags every PDF and every single video as something I need to manually check. It tells me that it's not checking them, but since I have a PDF, that needs to be checked because Canvas itself doesn't have the ability to check PDFs. It doesn't have the ability to check a video to see if it's captioned. So you're always going to get a clean bill of health from the accessibility checker there when your document itself is likely not accessible. So just be very cognizant of thinking like, oh, I passed accessibility checker, I'm good. It's not necessarily going to be giving you that correct information. So if you are using Canvas, you need to be, for your LMS, hold on a sec. Let me see if I can pull up a PDF really quick. For your PDFs, let's go. There's, in general, let me find a PDF. This one, let's find something. There's a bunch of really bad ones. You should judge me right here. Yeah, we'll just go with this. This is going to be bad. Don't judge me. ChatGPT helped me make this and didn't listen to anything I said. It was an hour-long frustration. Okay, so I have this PDF. I am lucky enough again to be at a school where I think I have they paid for this. I think I asked for it, but there is a prepare for accessibility. There's an accessibility check built in to the PDF. You can usually also just ask ChatGPT. There's actually some good ones. I think I put in the general, somebody had an accessibility tester GPT they had made, which would be a good thing to try to use and just throw a PDF at it, ask it if it's accessible. But if I go to prepare for accessibility or check for accessibility, it's already giving me all of these issues. This would have passed Canvas's test, but I can look and I already have, it's not a tagged thing. I have to check the logic reader myself. It doesn't have a primary language flagged. It doesn't have a title. It's telling me I have to like, there's just a lot happening here where it's like, I'm failing a lot in this document that is just a very straightforward study guide, right? And what's worse is if I actually got out the narrator tool, I guarantee most of this math is not anything math at all. So this is just Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Acrobat. Like I said, there are other PDF accessibility checkers. One of the other things you can do, and you should do even if you pass something like this, is actually listen with a screen reader. Pull out that narrator, pull out something, and just listen. Download JAWS. There's a lot of like options out there to try screen readers, and most of them will show you those PDFs are really, really quite bad. Thank you, Paul. Yes, can you throw it in this things if it's not already? Cool. So like I said, AI can write some HTML, and an HTML alternative is a great way, especially if you have a PDF that you don't have another source for. Oh, I don't have it. I will say Microsoft Word by default is accessible if you have built it accessibly. Microsoft Word is awesome in terms of like, oh, hey, let's look at this integral right here. If I go into the review section, I can actually just press read aloud.
Integral from C to D of integral from H sub 1, open paren y close paren to H sub 2, open paren y close paren of, F o.
So you can actually hear it say the math and verify that the math is exactly what you anticipated or was hoping for. So I do think that that's a very nice feature. Word also has in their review a check accessibility, but Word, if you already have documents in Word, it's a matter of doing the check accessibility in Word, making sure your document passes. I provide both the PDF and the Word doc in my classes because the PDF is useful because the formatting stays the same from computer to computer, right? And a student doesn't have to make sure that they can open up the Word doc, that they have Microsoft on their computer. They could be using a Mac or be on their phone or whatever it might be. They'll still be able to access the PDF. but I provide the Word doc as my accessible version so that students who need the screen reader to read math have that available to them. So those are the two real options. Is if you're going to create an accessible PDF in the first place, that's really where Overleaf is one of your best options. And so that's the documentation that Paul provided. He has this nice page of like the latest and best so far of how to make an accessible PDF, where you can actually see like Paul's workflow and how it's changed over time because, like I said, ever evolving. And then you have some guided templates for Overleaf if you want to see what he is using. I will say I'm having issues using even those guided templates because I don't have a paid version of Overleaf. So I am getting compile timeouts with those. So if you're not already an Overleaf person with a paid Overleaf account, I would maybe suggest staying with Word. PowerPoint's math is going to be the same. It renders as MathML for the screen readers. So as long as you have that math type, I don't ever use PowerPoints, but yeah. That is an option. So but like all the Microsoft Office pieces are typically pretty good. So, but again, if you're worried or you're having trouble at all, I think the simplest thing is to use something like this PDF remediation prompt and just recreate an accessible version and provide it to your students like this, right? Like give them. It also, I think, helps because a lot of folks having been on our online teaching team, a lot of folks in our LMS at least will just throw stuff into a module and students will just see like lecture notes 1.1 and it doesn't say how they should interact with it. And like it's a lot nicer if you provide some context in terms of how students should interact with your online materials. Like, oh, hey, I suggest working through these problems, or try problem 2, blah, blah. Like just giving some context makes students feel like they have direction, and then you can provide it in a page and give that accessible version as well. Yeah, and Overleaf is very affordable. I just haven't committed to this lifestyle yet. I was going to Overleaf before the accessibility crunch happened, and then at that point in time, there was no way to make an accessible math PDF with Overleaf except for like following 200 pages worth of documentation. So I went Word, and now Overleaf is the better option, and I'm still in Word, so eventually I'll swing back the other way. Okay. So if you want to check your math and text, like I said, Windows Narrator, Apple VoiceOver. I was pretty sure it was VoiceOver. I wasn't sure. And there's an accessibility check I provided in these workshop materials that you'll see. So if you want like a quick accessibility check, this is something you could just sort of do a checklist as you went through of like, okay, my headings describe content, great. Headings are in a logical order, perfect. This is just a cute little workbook that I made up when I did a previous workshop. So I provided that in the shared notes area here, that workbook for faculty. So longer term planning, previously this was my solution. I'm going to use Word. I'm going to use the built-in equation editor. I love that I can press Alt equal and get math to pop up pretty quickly, though I do love, actually just popping it in with some delimiters. Make sure you have a strong heading and list structure, and then using that built-in accessibility checker. So again, this is going to be a choice of if you're already familiar and happy with tech, use Paul's workflow for right now, and I'm sure Paul's document will continue to evolve as things change. If you are not familiar with tech, I wouldn't go there. I would just stick with Microsoft Word. But what we shouldn't be doing is screenshotting math into a Google Doc or something similar to that. We should be really thinking about everything I build, I'm going to build accessibly from the start. Yes, so here's your Overleaf. You do need to change the compiler. You probably do need a paid account. But yes, and Word editor, equation editor does take tech commands. So if you're used to writing like you're going to be pretty familiar with both, though I do find like it is hard moving from one to the other if you're not used to working in LaTeX, just like getting like margins and things to show up how you would expect. Though I will say one positive for tech also is the ability to add that horizontal space, vertical space, I can't think, V space, because that's one of the accessibility things that's going to pop up in my errors when I do my accessibility check on my document that's in there in Word, is if you just use a bunch of enters or a bunch of spaces to create space in a Word document, that is inaccessible. So you need to like change up how you're making those spaces happen by like changing some pieces. Yes, but VSpace is really nice in tech because you can create your guided lecture notes or whatever it might be, your assignment, your test, with students having enough space to work through them. I saw some stuff go on in the chat, but I am, hanging on for dear life here, trying to get done in an hour. We did talk a little bit about video content in the chat. I will try to capture all that and get it into the resource document. I use video often in my classes. I love to provide additional examples. I like to have some preview material. Some of my classes are flipped. Some of my classes are fully online. I've also used it for feedback, announcements. So when we make a video, we need to make sure that we have our captions. That's probably the most important. Technically, I believe you would fail compliance if they looked and saw they were auto-generated. So if you have your own YouTube videos, at least going in to the auto-generated captions and giving them a quick once over and then republishing them will make it so they don't say auto-generated. For me, even though I speak incredibly quickly, as you can all tell, I speak clearly enough that I tend to have fine captions. My auto-generated captions are really, really good. But I know that's not always the case for a lot of folks, especially those of us who speak fast, anybody with an accent. It can be a little bit more challenging for those auto-generated captions to be good. My experience, having used the Zoom captions as the webinar coordinator, they have been really, really good. I have not needed to make any edits to the Zoom captions. And what's nicer is that when I download them from Zoom and upload them to YouTube, they're not marked as auto-generated. So it looks like I took the time and care to make beautiful captions for that video. Other pieces to be considerate of with video. When you have something on the screen, you should also speak about what it is and describe it, because again, we're not just doing this for students who are, needing the captions because they have hearing issues, or maybe they're watching it in a space where they don't have headphones and they can't have the noise on. Their kid is sleeping, whatever it might be. But you also need to describe it for the students who are trying to interact with your video who can't see what's on the screen. And I think that's something that's overlooked quite often in terms of accessibility. It's not something campuses are going to look for compliance, but it is something to consider, that if you are talking about something on the screen, try to verbally describe it as well. It is also really important that students have control over the pacing and how they watch the video, that they can slow it down or speed it up. I think some of the ed techy things take those controls away because faculty want students to have to engage with an entire video, but it is an important consideration. But again, just like with text, we're having a lot of different starting points. If you have a self-recorded video that you are hosting, easy peasy. You have captions, you have the ability to get captions. You can upload your video to YouTube. Most other hosts will auto caption at this point in time. So you're good. You just need to go in and edit those captions. And for editing those captions, I will say a nice AI prompt telling when you download that transcript or that the caption file, the VTT, it comes in as a text file. You can throw that into AI and give it the context that you were talking about. And sometimes it can reword things. It'll figure out what words should have been in a way that doesn't change the text. So I've done that before. I had a faculty member in exercise science who had an entire video about yamas. It was a yoga video. So all of the words were Sanskrit and the auto captions were horrid. And she was like, I use this video all the time, but I need it to be good. And I was able to, and this was years ago, have ChatGPT take the existing transcript and redo it, telling it this is about yamas, this is in Sanskrit, giving the context of the video, and it did a perfect job of translating this jumbled, garbagey stuff into actual real words. So I'm pretty sure it would do the same for you on math if there was some things that it was having trouble with auto captioning correctly. It is a lot harder to remediate, but it's not impossible. Now there's a better workflow too than I used to have. YouTube videos that you don't own. Because in my mind, I don't want to recreate videos that I think other people have already done really, really well. Trevor Bassett, his videos are amazing, right? I don't need to redo a video. I'm going to do another example maybe for my students, but I'm not going to try to recreate the videos that he has with his beautiful graphics and such appearing on this chalkboard next to him in my classes. I'm just going to ask them, say, hey, if you want more, watch these. If I really want students to watch it, I need to embed it or have it in my course. I could say Trevor Bassett's great, and then I don't have to worry about this law, right? If I just say this in class, write it on the whiteboard, I'm fine. I'm in compliance. I haven't provided it. But the moment I provide it in Canvas to my students, I need to make sure it's accessible. And all of his videos, most of these videos out there are auto-generated. And you can see, even in this one thing, this is going to kill me is the theta values. It was like, this is going to tell me the theta values is what the text should have read, but the auto transcription said this is going to kill me. And this is not a big deal. Students could make sense of the whole video minus this error. But again, I'd be worried that someone who looks through my course, Pope Tech, right, is going to flag this video, and then someone might look at it, and it's not perfect. If I want to make it perfect, I can't really edit the download the captions. They might be inaccurate. Really, now I can. There's this lovely site, Downsub, but you just put in the YouTube link and it will give you, if you click like the download SRT, it gives you the whole beautiful caption, all the captions with timing. So for me, what I did when I was working through prepping for this, I downloaded a Professor Leonard video, went to Downsub, got the captions, put these both in. I'm lucky enough in my Canvas instance. Oh, I'm not logged in. Wild. That's a bad idea. In my Canvas instance, we have something called Canvas Studio, an add-in. I put it into Canvas Studio, and then I was able to upload that caption file. Because Canvas Studio, 3C Media is a California college, community college thing. But most of us have some other video hosting, playing device within our LMS. If you can bring in YouTube videos within that, you can usually bring in your own captions. So you could use Downsub, throw in the captions, and make any edits you need. So that's a nice way to get around things if you want. If you don't have that ability, or if that sounds like too much work, maybe you don't have some sort of hosting within your LMS. Another option is to do what I did in this, the modules here in this example thing. I provided a transcript. Now it's not perfect, but I took one of those videos, that same video we saw, I downloaded a transcript. This was before Downsub, so I need to go ahead and edit this. But I had Notebook LM, which can access Google, because it's a Google product. Download the transcript, download the actual transcript, and then I said, make me an accessible Canvas page. So you can see, this was straight up, no editing. I think I had to do one edit. I had to go, because Notebook LM doesn't like to make nice Canvas stuff. I had to take the transcript from Notebook LM, put it into ChatGPT for a nice Canvas page, and then here's a copy paste of exactly what was said in that video. And so in many ways, if a student can't listen to that video, it's almost better for them to walk through this organized set of notes than it is to sit there and stare at that video. But that's just another idea. Yes, and like Paul is saying, there's excellent auto captioning. My issue is for us, for Canvas Studio and WeVideo, it will not caption videos you don't own. So if I give it a link to a YouTube video, it will not caption that video. It will only use the captions that are within YouTube. So let me know if that's different. I remember we play tested, Yujo, when I was back on something on our teaching and learning team, and I don't remember ever playing with that. But for the most part, that's the biggest issue, is that it will not auto caption unless it's your video that you upload. If you provide a link, it uses whatever captions are at the link. So anyways, that's the video stuff. I'm just going to skip past some things. Checking video content is as simple as watching with captions on. If you can listen without looking at the screen, that lets you know if you've really nailed both pieces, not just like accessibility, but like accessibility plus, right? And then the last piece here, I only have 3 minutes, so I'm not going to get through any of this, but this is all we chatted about. When we talk about websites or other platforms being accessible, we're mostly talking about keyboard only navigation, that someone who doesn't have a mouse could still access everything. These keyboard shortcuts are things that we leverage all the time to make our work faster, and yet they're necessary for a lot of students. And then, of course, screen readers and things like that as well. So, like I said, keyboard shortcuts are great. These are the ones for Desmos, if you ever wanted to play with them. And so, like I said earlier, Desmos and CalcPlot 3D, you're not going to get in any trouble. Most of these other platforms are great. They are accessible inherently. It's just that since there's user-created content, you need to be checking the accessibility of that content. I know like Donut has a bunch of interactive stuff, and they're working towards flagging things as accessible or not. H5P, if you click on that one, it takes you to a bunch of interactive things that people have made. Almost all of them will have a accessibility rating right on the side. Yeah, so just be very careful that when you use a platform, again, for compliance measures, you're probably fine because you're using something that has met these standards on the surface, but you do want to check that the actual things you're using within that are working. And that's pretty much it. Most of the rest of the stuff is specific to Canvas. But I want to go back to that last idea. Don't panic. If you hand it out in person, it's not even part of this. It is only things that you're providing digitally. So your biggest thing here is go through your courses meaningfully and decide, what do you really need to be available online? What is moving the needle for students? What should be there? And know that removing some stuff is not necessarily bad. That might help reduce cognitive load. We do know that multiple forms of things is really useful for students. So I'm not saying take away all those things we know are going to be useful, but just make sure that they have that. You need to provide accessible versions of everything. So it doesn't have to be accessible in its own. I don't have to go through a PDF and make sure my PDF is accessible if I have an accessible alternative, if I'm providing the doc or a Canvas page with the same content, as long as students have that way. Tracy, same way you would check anything else, or Carol, the same way you check anything else, you want to just look through, make sure, like, you can either do an inspect tool to see if the things have alt text. You could use that narration tool to look at those particular things. I don't know if my Open Math has accessibility checkers built in. Oh, cool. Thank you, Mark. It does have a built-in. Cool. All right, so it is 3 p.m. And I want to leave us with this idea that one argument for accessibility that doesn't get made nearly often enough is how extraordinarily better it makes people's lives. And how many opportunities do we have to dramatically improve people's lives by just doing our job a little bit better? I know right now it feels like a whole lot of it because we have 11 days and probably, like me, 4 very inaccessible courses to fix. But I do want to just say thank you. I do have a survey link somewhere. It's coming. Let me go grab her. But if you have an idea, as the webinar coordinator, I'm always looking for new folks to present. So please, 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 thank you. And I hope I'll see a lot of you at the Summer Spark in June. And then I have my session survey. Let me grab you a link so that before you pop off, you can grab that. And if you're looking for a certificate for like PD credit, you need to email webinar coordinator. That information is in the bottom of that survey. So if you do that, you'll get all of our survey stuff. But like I said, I will continue to grab all of the resources. I see now there was a Q&A. I was just speed running this entire thing. But those will be available to you forever and ever and ever. And I will continue to update them just like I did this time. So thank you all. Oh, one last thing. I'm so slow. I forget everything. Last thing I was going to promote is our region, San Diego, Imperial County Community Colleges, has an accessibility week starting on Wednesday. And one of the presenters is a really great, the accessibility guy, Sean Jordanson. I followed him back on Twitter years and years ago. Now I follow him on LinkedIn. He's amazing. He's doing a whole talk on making math accessible. I think that's on Wednesday or Thursday. So if you didn't get enough, if you want more technical questions, he can technical your ear off. I would suggest registering and going to that session as well. Thank you. Got nothing else. I should look at the Q&A. I'm going to stop recording now.